Well, Chris Haigh, you are very adamant in making sure that I pronounce that the long A. Yes, I was thinking about to my phonics growing up, and I had to remember what you meant by long A. So, yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on, Chris. It's nice to see you.
You nailed it. Nice to see you.
How was CS5?
I was there such a brief amount of time.
Yeah,
I can't speak to the whole thing. I came in Thursday night and left Friday at noon. So I did see Katie Arrington speak, and she's always dynamic and amazing. And that alone was worth the trip. And then, of course, got to catch up with quite a few people that are in the industry. But it was brief.
Yeah. Kyle was telling me that it was like not even a full day. You were like
on the ground 16 hours. That's actually, I think, mistreating San Diego. Not respectful enough.
Had you been to San Diego before?
Oh, yeah. It's one of my favorite cities in the United States. And I, many times over, have thought, I want to move there. So any time to visit is always a blessing. But, geez, 16 hours. It's, again, seems disrespectful.
Seems hot and expensive to me.
San Diego stays pretty cool. Because as long as you're on the water, you're doing well. It's a nice climate most of the year. Expense wise, yeah, it can be expensive.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, where we're at here in Virginia, I mean, I'm sure you've been through here and you've seen kind of the cost of living over here. It's just, yeah, it's kind of crazy.
It is.
I can imagine over there in Cali with the taxes and everything, it's got to be a lot.
Coincidentally, I happen to have a housing problem right now. We rented when we first moved here, and we're coming up on that 2-year mark. And our ambassadors that own the home are coming back, and they said, we want to have our house back. So I'm looking at prices out here. I've never seen anything like it. I mean,
Where are you at again?
Great Falls.
Green Falls. I don't know where that is.
North of Reston.
Okay.
Along the Great Falls Park area.
Okay. And they're saying...
And one of the great things about this neighborhood is it feeds into Langley, and that's obviously a very desirable school district to be in, but man, you pay for it.
Oh my goodness, I'm sure.
We're looking at starter homes that are above $1 million. I'm like, wow. So even San Diego...
I cannot believe it. Because there was a period of time, because, the IntelliGRC headquarters is, they're in Fairfax. I'm sure you and Ozzy and them have talked about that and where we're all based out of. And there was a period of time where, Ozzy was talking about wanting me to come in and, be more in person, because we're pretty remote right now. And, talked about the logistics around that. And it's like, have you seen how much it is to buy a house up there now? Especially within like the last 3 years, there's just no way. It's just not possible.
Well, yeah. Tell Ozzy you need a raise and then make it possible.
Well, yeah. Now that's on the recording. He'll see it at some point. I'm sure. They treat us really well, but even doing really well, salary wise and whatnot. You just said it. I mean, talking about $1 million for like a starter home in some of those northern, metropolitan areas is just, I just can't believe that that's what, because I've been with Intelli and I've been in this area for, I started working at the company, and related to Intelli like back in 2019. Mm-hmm. Some of those houses, it was always more expensive to live in Nova. It always was. I mean, that was always the case, at least inside, in my career. But, we're talking houses that were like 500,000, 600,000 being what you're talking about, like $1 million or 900,000, like just a crazy explosion in costs. I mean, I know this is totally irrelevant to what we were going to talk about, but it's just,
let's talk about real estate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could make it a real estate, securing the real estate industry. Yeah. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate your insights and, how you guys have been a good partner and friend to us, in a lot of ways. And, I thought, who better to have on next. So, I wanted to just jump into what I normally do on the podcast. Okay. I like to I like to give people, a little bit more of a personal insight into the person I'm talking to, because, people see you at these conferences. I was looking at your guys' LinkedIn, and you guys got some upcoming stuff. And so I know that's busy season, so people will see you, and maybe if they know a little bit more about you, you're probably already very approachable, but, just that level of trust that comes from, getting to know somebody personally is, I think, always going to be beneficial, especially in this industry when so many people need help. So, if you're willing to, as far back as you're willing to go and as personal as you're ready to get, tell me about yourself and what made you the person that you are today and helping the people that you do today.
Let's go all the way back. Born and raised in Indiana.
Really? I was born in Indiana.
I thought you looked familiar.
Yep. Munster, Indiana.
Munster? All right.
Yeah.
Well, I have spent some time in Northwest Indiana, Crown Point area, but grew up in Fort Wayne, did Purdue engineering, aeronautical and astro, and then did law at IU, so truly a house divided. Practiced at practiced at Indiana's biggest firm, Barnes & Thornburg, for quite a bit, practiced at a Chicago firm, also worked at the Indiana Senate, and that's where I got into policy analysis. This is while I was going to law school, but worked there a little before and after as well. Fascinating to me to see how the sausage is made and have that kind of complement my knowledge in law. So got to know the process of how laws are made in Indiana, and certainly very similar to how it is done congressionally. And that, to me, it sounds like a real scattered career path until you look at CMMC. It's like, okay, I've always slept with my computer since I could put it on a laptop. I've loved cybersecurity. I've loved technology, aerospace, defense, law, and policy. And that just, you marry all that together, and I think you get CMMC. So when CMMC came out, I was hired by a Maryland-based firm, cybersecurity firm, to come in and start writing about it, write some of the earliest materials that have to go through the DoD approval, and we were going through that process. And we actually were tidying up the first version of the course materials, and they dropped CMMC 2.0, and we had to throw half of our stuff away and start over and write again. So that, that's what?
There's Delta 20, baby.
That's right.
Yeah. we lost those. What happened? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it was interesting to watch the whole process evolve, and writing it twice really does help you learn a lot about it. So
Yep.
Got to know it, and I thought I could see doing this. I mean, it's fascinating to me. So I went into the PIPA program, Provisional Instructor, Provisional Assessor, and been doing this ever since.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that you were one of the PIs. Yeah, I mean, I know a few of them. I think Jeff Baldwin is one, and he was my instructor for the CCP. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I mean, I do know some other ones, but it's always like a scattered, there's a lot of different points of view of just how the world worked going through that time of just having these pre-32 CFR and like even pre the proposed rule, just like how people were thinking things were going to turn out. I mean, does the program today look like what you guys were thinking it was going to look like back when you were writing about it and doing your iterations of your documentation and stuff like that?
So, I would say largely. I think we saw where this was going. I had, a lot of people casting doubt. Even I sat across from a L3 Harris executive one point. I remember very vividly, female executive said, "It's never going to go through. I don't know why you're wasting your time on this." And I'm like, okay,
that's ironic.
That's a strong opinion, but okay. Yeah. And there were some times when you kind of wondered, is it going to make it? Let's see. But yeah, it's in large part, I think it's tracked. And when you hear the stories behind some of the changes, like the 20 that dropped out when we went to revision 2, you hear why. And hey, this was Canada saying, look, we really want to follow, your standard, your pioneering, but you could have just stuck with NIST and it would have been a lot easier than, the DoD getting in there and mucking this all up. And so that it was part of the feedback that DoD listened to. Okay, you're right. Well, let's go back to NIST and keep it simple. Even though it's a U.S. standard now, Canada's following it, and not only that, leapfrogging over us and doing revision 3.
Yeah, that's something we've been talking a lot about. Is what are we going to do, not just in the app, but just how are we going to be prepared to help help MSPs learn this? Because it's like, it's one thing to read NIST 850, 171 Rev 3 and 853 and get familiar with the format, but switching to like living that way, where part of the expansion of what you're expected to do is actually define things in a very particular way with the ODPs and just the different workflow and mindset that the government has, the removal, for example, of like the VoIP stuff and just all the different things that we had gotten used to under Rev 2. Mm-hmm. It was already kind of like pulling teeth trying to really teach a lot of, teach the DIB and their managed service providers how to do this. And now, thankfully we're pretty far along with their familiarity with Rev 2, but I feel like there's going to be some similar frustrations with, once it's Rev 3 time,
Oh yeah.
And I'm curious what your thoughts of. I was asked recently by one of my colleagues, what have you heard anything? Because I'm one of the ones in our internal team that spend most of my time, reviewing things and trying to be patiently awaiting updates and things like that from DFARS and stuff like that and DoD. And one of the things that they were asking me is, when do you think this Rev 3 stuff is coming out? Because we've had several customers, trying to understand what the timeline for that is. And, one of the things that we do, I'm sure you have a similar approach, is, as you're consulting or as you're helping somebody, we spend a lot of time with MSPs specifically so that they become the experts to help their customers. But, when they're asking about, how do I implement this? What should I define as the frequency for certain scans, or, for the 800-171 Rev 2 requirements, we're always referencing the Rev 3 ODPs, because it's
absolutely.
Like, if you
might as well.
Yeah, exactly. Might as well. And, but now we're getting people asking, okay, well, when is this actually going to happen so that I can start to transition my actual documentation to align with what's going to be expected for that? And, we can't say anything, because it's like all we can do is speculate. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, because my gut tells me that with the FAR CUI rule, having been proposed and in proposed limbo for forever, my gut tells me that we'll maybe see that finalized by the end of the year. And that's my gut. I could be totally wrong, but because of that, I'm sure that that'll be kind of like a kick in the pants for further rulemaking for the DoD. But I'm just curious what other people are thinking about this.
I'll tell you what I have heard that makes me arrive at almost the exact same timeline you have. There are several things coming from different sources. One of them is, of course, we know GSA has said, yep, we're going to do 171 revision 3.
Yep.
Okay. There's a huge agency that's already saying, yeah, let's start implementing revision 3 and stop worrying about revision 2. Second, I know from, I believe it was Stacy Bastianic, when she was still really leading the charge with CMMC, said the revision 3 draft is already done, and it's over at legal or something at that point. I think they have it done. I don't think there's much more work to do at the DOW. What they're doing, I believe, is letting the DIB catch up a little bit. Now it's requirement, and here's our timeline that's already started. And next November, yet another major milestone of it's going to go into contracts. When we look at the numbers, like at our last town hall of just over 1,000 DIB contractors that have been assessed, I think the DoD wants to see that number get up before they say, okay, now let's go ahead and roll out revision 3, because it is less than 1% of the DIB that's even made it to the finish line.
Yeah,
so I think those things are playing out. The third source, though, is actually ISACA, and they've come in and said, look, we're going to sunset all the materials. Sorry about your luck, APPs, approved publishing partners that have been in this business, but you're out of the business and we're taking over, and the new materials will come live around, end of this year. New materials being revision 3. So all those three things point to about where you are. My gut says toward the end of the year, we're going to have that timeline. If not, it's going to be implemented.
Exactly right. Like my assumption is something similar to the initial verbiage of DFAR 7012 is going to kind of get hit in the face. Something similar to where, it goes into effect, but you're given like a, how DFAR 7012 says 800-171 by December 31st of 2017, but it came out in 2016. I have a feeling that it's going to be something kind of like that, where, we had this current, deviation memo that's kind of puts everybody in standstill mode on Rev 2, and the 32 CFR is written to Rev 2. So it's like, I agree with you. I think the DoD has an interest in not discouraging people from continuing to implement and get certified and, keep working without, throwing a wet blanket on the fire of, oh, wait, we're switching over to this bad boy now.
Let's make it even harder. All that work you put in. Right.
Well, I'm curious. I'm curious about some of your background points because you're right. That is a wide and scattered breadth of experience from somebody who, has been pretty integral in some of the CMMC stuff. And so one of the things I'm curious is, your LinkedIn says that you're involved in quite a bit. Maybe you don't update your LinkedIn. I don't know, but it says that you have a lot of like things that you are for so long to present involved in. So I'm curious, first question, how? How are you doing all that with everything going on with CMMC right now and all the clients you guys support? How are you handling and juggling all that?
So, let's talk about some of those things in there. You'll see kind of a medtech emphasis in some of the jobs I've had or still have. Here's what happened when I was at Barnes & Thornburg, Indiana's largest firm. They knew I was doing aerospace, and one of the rainmakers handed me a file. He's like, I don't know what this guy's doing, but it's something aero and technical, figured out. And it was medtech, but it was using pneumatic engines and motors to do things in an MRI setting where you can't have electrical motors. So I would say, was it something I studied? No, not at all. Is it something that interested me? Absolutely. And I ended up getting involved in that company, going in-house and being in-house counsel with that company for a number of years. And we still have patents. We still have the technology. So there's that's still alive, but it's certainly not the bulk of my time. Bulk of my time, for all the reasons you already know, is CMMC. This is where it's where the opportunity is. Some of the people that I met back there in that medtech company, and we had two of them actually that were interrelated. They're like a parent-child. Some of the people said, hey, we have this other medtech company and we're kind of discouraged with where it's going. And this is about 2 years ago. They said, would you like to come in before we just wash our hands clean and say, kind of sucked. And they were willing to throw some money at me and at ownership. And I thought, I love the technology, so I will do my best. Full disclosure, I've got another job. I'm also CEO over there, but they asked me to come in as CEO, and I'm still meeting with them. Actually, one of the people I met with in San Diego is a partner of that company, and we've hired him before. So we're still moving forward. The board is very accommodating of me not being able to spend even a fraction of full time. I mean, it's like, let's say 4 hours a week is what I might spend on that. And they're okay with that. The reality is that because of what I do in CMMC, it's actually, even though you think, okay, that's medtech, this is cybersecurity, how are they possibly related? That medtech company is trying to get into federal government contracting. And what a great opportunity for somebody who's in federal government contracting and knows quite a bit to use the same connections to try to help them out. So that's the interest there, and what they're doing, I think, could save lives on the front line with our are
Soldier, yeah.
people in service. So that's the parallel, and how it's more related, more connected than you would think, just looking at, the LinkedIn list.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I mean, with this particular company, what is it like for them having to scope out the opportunities from from an innovator's perspective? Because I'm assuming you've got to get that technology or whatever it is kind of in front of some eyes that matter, right?
That's right.
What is that looking like? Are you involved in that process, the business development side of things?
It's a very small team, so yes, this is one of those where, yeah, you mop the floors too.
Yeah,
it's that kind of a team.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, I'm involved in that, and all the more reason why I carry two cards to almost everything I go to down in DC, whatever meeting it might be. Often, I'm at AUSA, for example, a member of that, and they have these breakfasts with generals and stuff, and I'm meeting people in the military, and perfect, good. Every once in a while, one of them seems to be in the right place where I can say, let me talk about this. Let me talk to you about this other little business that I'm involved in. And yeah, that's how the conversations go.
That's awesome. I mean, everybody needs security, right? Like that technology and the intellectual property for it. I mean, it doesn't hurt to have somebody who's got their tentacles into all sorts of stuff helping out. So that's really cool to hear. Tell me about the lawyer experience, because you're patent law, correct? I'm assuming
Right.
that was the main driver there. I know that you said that you came into the CMMC ecosystem kind of early on, and got interested in it early on. But before that, with all the patent law stuff that you're doing, how did that, first off, before we get into the Indiana and state law and state regulations and stuff like that, how did you get into patent law? I know that you went to school for it, obviously, but what was the driver there for you? Why did that interest you so?
So I would say it's figuring out sometime in college, when I was sitting in like 500 level courses in aeronautical engineering. I don't think I can do this. Literally, it was one of those. Whew, I'm glad that I was in love with aerospace enough to have the drive to get to the finish line and get the degree. But I kept thinking, I just don't see myself being in a cubicle, clicking and doing this kind of stuff for the rest of my life. I need to be out more. And one of my fraternity brothers actually said, I'm going to law school and I'm going to do patent law with this, because if you have an engineering degree or certain science degrees, you can take the patent bar and be in this little tiny subset of lawyers that nobody else can do this because they don't have that technical background. So, well, that's interesting. So then I get to help clients, sit down with people, listen to what's possibly their greatest achievement of all time in their heads. And they're like, can't wait to tell you about what I have been working on for the last 5 years. Let's go patent it and make millions. You're helping them do that. And that was interesting to me. And it's not for everybody. I used to tell people, if you can't sleep at night, call me and I'll tell you what I did today. Because sometimes it's like you met with the inventor and then for 2 weeks, you're just writing. So that can be dry. That can be really dry. But if you're into the how do things work and, hey, this is the latest innovation in this particular sector of the market, the pneumatically powered device that allowed for the first time for women to have a breast tumor removed with just a local anesthetic, and they can have it done on the spot. They've got all these worries about this lump, and is it cancerous? Is it not? Well, let's take it out. We'll tell you. We'll do all this stuff later and analyze whether it was cancer, but it's gone. That had never been done before. And that particular invention ended up making the industry millions and millions of dollars because of how quick it was, how it could be done. The first time the woman goes to see the doctor, and it just alleviated all kinds of fears and panic. So being able to see inventions like that change the world in some way, even in a tiny little way, fascinating to me. And that's part of what kept me in it. But then going in-house, being more entrepreneurial with it, that's definitely more where I feel like my heart is happier, rather than let's work for some big company, let's work for some big machine where billable hours is all that matters. I like being on the the side where we let's create a company and see what we can do with this.
Yeah, you forge your own path.
Yep.
And yeah, that's cool. I like that. So I guess my question is then, with Meerkat, tell me about Meerkat and the inception of Meerkat and what the main driver for that business coming about, because I mean, it sounds like you had a pretty cool, early portion of your career before Meerkat, a lot of cool experiences. I mean, what was the driving factor was it that you wanted to kind of, forge your own path?
Yeah, I'm one of those that I think I don't believe I would really do well listening to somebody else's directives. I'm regretfully, I think that's been me most of my life. For example, I had a full ride if I would just have gone into the Air Force and done their ROTC, and I said no, thank you. I'd rather take out loans that I'm still paying back now, because I didn't think I would be able to just listen to commands. This is how you're going to do it, and this is how you jump. I'm not really wired that well for that. So at that Maryland firm, I was advanced partner, this cybersecurity firm. I ended up thinking, I think I can do this better by myself, or with, a select group of people that I want to work with. And so that was the initiation of Meerkat. By the way, I told you I'm an instructor. So what does Meerkat consist of? Pretty much my favorite people that I've been able to teach.
Yeah.
Pick and choose, and you can look at the roster, and one other person that I've met just from being in the DC area, and we have NDIA as a client, for example, and their vice president said, "Hey, I really want you to meet this other girl who's been in cybersecurity for decades for the federal government, and now she works for us." I mean, I've just had this opportunity to meet really good people that are really good at what they do, and in some cases say, "What do you think? Can we work together?" And we're building a really sharp team because of that.
Has that affected your general disposition of wanting to kind of be the leader and forge your own path per se? Has that built or curated a philosophy for the types of clients that you take on, and has that impacted relationships with clients that you've had who might be pretty pushy or have something very specific that they want?
Yeah, I think client relations, that's another animal. And what's funny, I think, about being in cyber is it's not a whole lot different than patent law. You get some people in this space, they're extremely technical and they really know their stuff in a geeky way. A lot of them can't relate to people to save their lives. And I like to say this when I was in patent law too. I think they put us in the basement where clients wouldn't really run across us for a reason, right?
Yeah.
A bunch of engineers that are like,
oh, it's strategic.
yeah, you don't want to talk to them. No. But if you get a couple people who are really good with people, but you have a team of those brilliant kinds of people that come to help in the journey, I think that's the best combination. I think we have that.
Yeah, I think one of the business owners I was talking to recently, Andy Sauer from Sentinel Blue, I had him on in our most recent episode, and he was telling me that his perspective is kind of the same. He had a hard time, he had a hard time just not shooting for the stars with the passion projects and things that he wanted to do. But one of the things that he was saying, and I'm curious if you've kind of adopted a similar, philosophy, is, he's always been hiring people, not just that he jives well with and like that are similar to him and have similar dispositions, but also people who are pretty opposite of him. And, that balance him out because, realist versus passion versus, all these different things like a bit. Have you seen similar things, or have you been, fortunate enough to where that's not been a hard line thing you've had to focus on and balancing each other out?
Oh, I think we need balances. We have that. And having another me running around probably isn't a good idea anyway. Right. So we do have absolutely some different perspectives that come to the table, and I think that makes us all better. But also we have, again, going back to, these are people that I've instructed and they've been literally the best of the best. I'm like, you know what, I would love to work with you. If it's not just a partnership, maybe you're 1099 for Meerkat, and that's what most people are doing. These people come in with decades of opinions, and that doesn't always mean they're going to agree. And we have some of them that are like, no, I would not do it that way. I don't read it that way. We have some people who are, I see why they have their perspective, but it's a very strong opinion, and it differs from some other people in the industry. And we get that. We call them meerkat fights. We have these little battles of opinions.
Awesome.
And
That's
I
great.
think it's productive in some ways, but I can see how others would be intimidated and feel like it's not as productive. But I think the intellectual exchange and, okay, if I can understand your perspective, you understand mine, we're all better for it. But we definitely have that.
Yeah. I think, of all the, as much as I want to be a proponent, especially in this industry where there's a lot of very vulnerable contractors that just need good information and they need help. So as much as I am a proponent of ironic and amicable, knowledge sharing and posts on LinkedIn and stuff like that, I will say some of the most important moments for me in my career learning this stuff, because this has been my main thing since pretty much the beginning of my career, has been those moments of debate and controversy. You're learning from people who have an entirely different way of looking at things. There's one assessor that one of my first assessments that I was, supporting an OSC on, his background was Department of Energy, and their RMF processes and, their unique things that they're dealing with, and vastly different interpretation on certain requirements. And it's interesting, but it was one of probably the most like controversies like that, where you're debating and you're kind of engaging and trying to prove your point. They have been some of the most fruitful moments. And I think if a team fosters that, obviously everybody being respectful and, careful to, uphold people's dignity and things like that, which is also sometimes hard when you have very professional, very introverted and very straightforward and technical people. Sometimes arrogance and things like that can get in the way, but fostering debate and respectful debate has been one of the best things for me in my career, at least from my experience.
100% agree. 100% agree. And it is a delicate balance, but I think that is the ideal team, where you come in with these varying perspectives and strong opinions, bring them on, but be respectful, and let's have these debates so that everybody, at least at a minimum, walks away with a better understanding of the various perspectives out there. And you're not just saying, those harebrained people over there, I don't even understand their side. No, this is actually one of the assets of being a lawyer too. You want to understand the other side. You want to understand it so well you can make their arguments and predict their arguments.
Yep.
And we're in a place with this particular framework where we are watching the sausage get made. We're watching people interpret 32 CFR for the first time. One of the debates we had internally, I think, is a fascinating debate. When you read the rule, you see some comments in the rule about how do you protect SPD.
Here we go.
Right? And there is a statement that should be protected at a level commensurate with CUI.
Yeah.
Well,
therefore, the FedRAMP requirements apply, which is absurd, in my opinion.
Well, that part wasn't in the actual rule, right?
It was in the comments,
but it was in the comments.
But so very confusing nonetheless.
We have people for very good reason that say, and by the way, this is, for example, Sherry Caddy on our team. She's the one she actually helped author NIST 53. She's a rock star in cybersecurity. She's the one that comes from DOE and did early retirement. We're like blessed to have her on the team. She's like, that's awesome. This is the way the rule should be read. You should read that means SPD needs to be protected at the level commensurate with CUI. And she's a policy girl. And there are other assessors that are the exact same way. We have one on our team. And one of the other assessors, who's at MSSP, comes from a very different perspective. He's like, remind me, I'm going to send you none of my clients to assess. Because they will fail.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I read that too. I read the whole public inspection when the 32 CFR, the proposed rule and the final rule came out. I read through the whole hundreds of pages, and I had that same guttural reaction of, what did I just read? Now, I hadn't gotten to the rule yet, so I was just like, here we go. But yeah, it was one of those moments where I was like, that has some huge implications for everyone, everywhere, at all times in this ecosystem. I mean, we're talking about MSPs having to do total retooling. You will not be able to be an MSP in this industry unless you are ready and willing to give it all up for FedRAMP product. I mean, there's so many implications that came with that. And I'm really glad, not to knock Sherry was her name, or anybody else on your team. I'm really glad that, from what I've seen, the vast majority of the C3PO teams that we've interacted with, the assessment teams that we've interacted with, have been pretty, I don't want to say lenient, but they've been steadfast to the rule, and they've been steadfast to the cap, which doesn't mention those nuances about SPD and those comments, which I can understand why, if we agree security protection data needs to be protected. I can think of somebody right now. I actually want to have them on because I want to have like a friendly, kind of back and forth with them. But, I can think of somebody right now, and more than one person right now, that believes that security protection data in and of itself doesn't need to be protected. It only needs to be protected when it's residing on a security protection asset, like the actual. Okay. So, like, for example, log data only matters if it's as part of the SIM or as part of the operating system of an in-scope asset or something like that. But if you ran vulnerability scans, for example, and stored them on offsite storage, like backup storage or something like that, for like historical data, that's no longer security protection data in this person's view. And I wholeheartedly disagree with that.
I don't follow that one, but that's okay.
I think the scoping guide, I think the 32 CFR is pretty clear about the data itself is also a scoping criteria. But, my point being, there's variance of views in this, and getting back to the original point is like, that only helps the ecosystem when people are able to foster good, healthy debate. And I really like your perspective on that.
And in my background, the part that started to trigger me was being a policy analyst for Indiana Senate. And so I looked at that when I was reading it the same way you did. I thought, that's where the DoD is at least stated they wanted to go. It didn't make it into the final rule. We don't know exactly why. Lawyers might have gotten involved. Who knows? Maybe some realist said, you're going to kill all the MSPs off. Stupid, don't do that. But I do think it at least showed some intent there of what the DoD thought.
At one point, it got into the comments somehow. It got there somehow. I'm glad it didn't get into the rule, and I'm glad, security protection data doesn't have to be protected with FedRAMP products. But it still needs to be protected. That's my point. Is it's 800-171 is the standard for security protection assets and their data, not FedRAMP, thankfully. But I agree with you. There was intent, and if you remember way back when in the proposed rule, what did it say about MSPs, whether or not they had CUI coming from the contractor or not? What did it say the requirement was going to be?
Level 2.
Level 2, the certification at the same level that their customer was going to need.
That's right.
And everybody went, what? What are you talking about?
Right.
So, yeah, but I agree with you. It does show intent.
So, I mean, the debate is not flawed in having it, but right. We do have those. And I think we have people like Matt Travis who have come down with, here's where the cyber AB is, even though that, every time he does it, he'll say, we don't represent the opinion of the DOW. But cyber AB actually had an entire town hall on that exact issue and provided at least his suggested guidance on that. So the industry, I think, has landed for the most part. I agree with you. It seems to be the majority of C3POs and assessors who are saying, okay, this is how we're interpreting it for now.
Yeah.
Until such time that the DOW says,
otherwise,
hey guys, here's the new direction. Right.
Yeah. What is the NERC side of the house that you've invested some time in, headspace to? Because I'm not familiar. I know it's about critical infrastructure and things like that, but I'm not super familiar with, that framework and how it applies to, power grids and things like that. Where does that land, and where did that come from, especially from your background? Where did you get into that?
So I got into that from my prior firm that was involved in NERC, and it is another framework that I think is important. Critical infrastructure to me in general is important, critical. And
Yeah.
what we have at the DoD, I call the gold standard, that we can use that when we go in and talk to utility companies and others. Well, here's the way we're interpreting that in a DoD world. Our education, I think, can flavor the NERC SIP instruction and NERC SIP guidance. So what's different is they don't have any formal training for here's how you become a NERC SIP assessor or whatever. It's really anybody can hang their hat and say, I do this. DoD has formal training, of course. So now combine the formal training with get a deep knowledge of what NERC is about and how their cybersecurity framework, specifically the NERC SIP part of it, how it's structured, how it's different, and then see if you can shine a different light on why you're doing this kind of practice and what is a best practice. Because I think NERC has one, from my experience doing this, has one very different way of creating the cybersecurity framework. They vote on it. They literally have all the utilities get together and say, do we want this new rule? Do we want to upgrade our cybersecurity framework to require this? It's a popularity contest. I kind of have a problem with that, but at least they have a framework. In contrast, and Sherry and I both speak in the water industry as well. We've gone to their annual events and been keynote speakers for the last 2 or 3 years. Water doesn't have a framework. That's even crazier. They have a suggested framework, but no requirement, nothing whatsoever that says you must do this. And that, to me, it's kind of stunning that we're here, but it's also, let's talk about critical infrastructure in general and start to, if it's possible, and Sherry and I have talked about this quite a bit, if it's possible, start to learn from the other ones that are out there and maybe even form a little bit more homogeneous cybersecurity guidance. Like, okay, we're all really kind of protecting our data in the same way. We're trying to protect it from the bad actors. Can we learn something from, some of the threats that we've seen in the power industry? Absolutely. We should be studying Salt Typhoon, Volt Typhoon, and saying, how can we protect from that when we're in the DIB? What can we learn to make sure our data stored here is not susceptible to the same kind of attacks that they're seeing over there? Even, there are things that happen to some of the companies that are in the gambling space. And there was an attack vector. You've probably heard of this one. It was about a year ago that they came in through the aquarium heater. Literally, it was a Internet of Things aquarium. They came in and pretty much locked down the data at one of the casinos using the attack vector of the aquarium heater that somebody foolishly set up on the same network as the sensitive data.
Yeah. Hey, they don't have network segmentation, man. You can't blame them.
Right. But can we learn from that? Absolutely.
100%.
So being I think in more spaces than just this is bigger than the DoD is where I'm going with this. Critical infrastructure to me is one of our, I think, glaring Achilles heels in the United States. And yeah. I want to carry across the various frameworks or lack of frameworks what we might be able to learn collectively.
So for critical infrastructure, I want to ask about NERC first, but we can talk about other ones too, obviously. But for NERC, what you said, people vote on the different requirements that kind of get added to this program or this framework, whatever we're going to call it. But what, currently, if you were to take a snapshot of what the requirements kind of look like today, what requirements are they most akin to? Like, would they feel like NIST type requirements, ISO Annex A type requirements, or what is the structure? What does it look like? And also, what do you think is most significantly missing from what NERC is providing today?
The huge difference with utilities is the amount of OT that they have. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think kind of defines how they've come up with their own framework is, okay, how do we deal with 50-year-old equipment, and some of which doesn't even connect to the internet, or now we're trying to connect it in a new way that was never planned for. This was not designed to do this. How do we do that? So they have a different problem that they're dealing with than most DIB manufacturers. The manufacturers, yes, some of them are using some old tool and die stuff, but there's also a lot of new technology that we're dealing with.
So we're talking about things like supply chain risk management type requirements and flaw remediation and isolation requirements, for end of life equipment, things like that.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yep. And the grid, you look at all that equipment out there, geez, a lot of it's 50, 60 years old.
Hmm.
And and that applies to water too, as well. So we're using stuff that existed before the internet existed and trying to figure out how not to just rip and replace, keep using it. We can't afford rebuilding all of America, but how do we deal with, wait, we want that control tower to talk to this one, and so let's put a link between the two and balance OT with the latest technology.
So, I mean, what would you say? You expressed that you have a little bit of concern with just this popularity contest approach. What would you say is something that's glaringly wrong with, or missing, I should say, from this current requirements for these electric companies?
It's run by the electric companies in contrast to, a regulatory body that says, here's the standard we need. And that concerns me because the electric companies are the ones proposing the new rule, and they're incentivized to not make it too hard, not make it too expensive. Let's just deal with, we're getting better. Every couple of years we have a new proposed rule. We're getting a little bit better than we were before, but it's not a drastic, hey guys, this is the new standard that you really need to follow and get a perfect score on. Even that, they have fines and things in place, but it's not mission critical that you get your perfect 110.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that I struggle with a little bit, to be honest with you. Where is it's different for DIB contractors, because DIB contractors are going into covenant with the government to do work, perform deliverables or tasks and services, and handle data that is not their own in covenant with the government. Like it's a preemptive, I know that I am agreeing to this, and this if I start to do this work. Whereas, some of these critical infrastructure, and again, I'm not balking what you're saying by any means. This is the philosophical challenge for me is, these are private companies. Like near us is Rappahannock Electric, right? They are the main electricity provider for my area. And I mean, they're private companies. They're not government funded, government established companies. They are, they're private, or at least to my understanding, they're private organizations that provide a service at their own volition. Like, how do you tell them, I know there's safety and things like that, but how do you tell them what the security requirements need to be when it's their business, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Good question. And really, I think it comes down to, it's a different script than what the DoD is, where you can enter into a contractual relationship and demand it. But it is a public service with huge implications if it were to go down. And I think that brings it to a level of interest that we should have federal mandates apply. I think when you look at the safety of a population, an entire state or whatever that could be impacted, more than a state, we saw the Columbia
pipeline, yeah.
When you look at the vast implications and even deaths that could be prevented had we imposed some better cybersecurity standards, I think that's what allows the federal government to think this through and revisit this topic. And here's what's interesting. I think right now is a great opportunity to do that. And here's why. Some of the electric companies are on bases. and they have to be compliant already. They're now looking at CMMC right in the face and say, but I was doing this other frame. We don't care what you were doing over there at NERC. This is the framework you have to follow here. So utilities, some of them are being forced to come up to a CMMC standard. Maybe it's time to have that conversation. Let's try to unify some of these standards and have conversations across critical infrastructure to get a better defensive posture in the United States. I mean, the fact that Iran can come in and even breach Lockheed should tell us we need to have more conversations. We need to be better.
Yeah. I mean, Lockheed being one of the main primes that had to deal with CMMC probably earlier than anyone.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I'm curious. I guess, philosophically that would make sense, because by the same standard, we have regulations on, restaurants and, for food quality and health inspections and things like that. So that, I guess it makes sense. And I guess what would you say would be, because critical infrastructure is a little bit different in some ways than, an information system. Like, I mean, it has information systems in it. What would you say should be the main driving, if you could go and talk to your congressman right now and beg them for something to protect critical infrastructure, what would be the main things you would be asking for from a federal level to be, kind of mandated?
I think we need more information sharing, which is a funny topic when we talk about the DoD, because CUI is here because we didn't information share. We can talk about that. But more information sharing. They already have the ISACs, right? But they don't really talk to each other. It's even hard for me to break into other ISACs. Why can't I be in the defense ISAC when we're in defense? No, they reserve that for just a small group, and then they don't really cross-pollinate and talk to each other. That conversation, I think, needs to be opened up. And can we share sensitive data about breaches without being worried? We should be able to. One of the problems with the electrical industry is they're disincentivized because NERC literally shares office space with EISAC, where you're supposed to report. And they're terrified to do that. Their lawyers will say, you will not call in and share that breach, what just happened, even though they ask them to, right? There's a requirement. You have to report your breach, but here's what the lawyers are thinking. And I went into the annual NERC meeting and heard this exact reasoning. Lawyers are thinking, you report that, do you realize there's a $10 million fine plus for having that breach? Why in the hell would you tell them? So that conversation, and I think the whole reporting and you're being fined for breaches, we need to revisit this and make it so that information sharing is key. And I asked NERC, I was the oddball in the room. I'm the instructor. Everybody else there is from a Duke Energy or, an executive level at one of the energy suppliers. I'm the guy that asks the uncomfortable questions. But one of the questions was, is there a way for us to anonymously report some kind of a breach as a utility company? And there's not. I don't know why. But wouldn't that make sense to be able to share that information and have lawyers say, yeah, this is the way you can be a good Samaritan and help the rest of the grid out. The other thing that I thought was strange is they didn't have a report on this. They give their annual report, and they're talking about here's trending and salt typhoon, volt typhoon. I asked again the awkward question, how long was the longest it took for us to figure out China was in our back door through volt typhoon in the last year? They had the answer. They just didn't put it in the report. It's 380 days that China sat in one of our utilities before we realized China's in our utility. We need to be talking about these things. We need to be sharing that kind of information. It should be on the annual report, and it should be, hey, we've got an advisory here, and you guys need to look at this, check your own back door. Here's what we're seeing. And I guess that requires, in my opinion, a revamp of how they're currently doing it, because they're not incentivized.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds to me like finding somebody so finding an organization, millions of dollars for something that occurred not due to like negligence, for example, or something that would result in a much deeper investigation to, the fault of the company, it makes sense why nobody's reporting. Now, there's obviously ethical concerns there, but it makes sense why. It makes sense why a company might not report, to the DoD. But I guess the main thing that I see as a difference between, the DFAR 7012 reporting requirements and this is that you don't automatically get fined for reporting an incident to DC3, right? There's no there's nothing that is the negative outcome other than the potential for a deeper investigation by DCMA or whoever it ends up being, right? But it's good to we're always encouraging people that if they have any kind of breach or any kind of even certain drastic CUI spillages where somebody sent a massive amount of CUI somewhere they didn't mean to, or it was an accident or something like that, to just be upfront and honest. It reduces your risk rather than increases your exposure, especially if they were to find out about it later and you never reported it. So I feel like that should be probably the predicate for a lot of their incentive structures and how they change things in this.
That's a good word for it. It should be the predicate. It should be, let's keep this in mind. And like I said, this is also the predicate for CUI. Is CUI came about because all the agencies weren't sharing. And this was a report, a result of 9/11, that they did an analysis. What could we do better? Share information. Don't have every agency have their own rules, but have a common set of rules. And let's call it controlled unclassified information, and have the same rules in place across all agencies. That's where I think you get when you mature as a country and as you're looking at sensitive data, is you start to unify how you're doing this and talk to each other. And I think that's what we are hopefully given an opportunity right now to do across critical infrastructure.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I've not spent much time thinking about critical infrastructure. My headspace is filled with CMMC.
Well, there's a lot to talk about there.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but it's interesting to realize, we feel like, I work in the basement of my house, and, sometimes I'll come up for air, we go to church or something, and, I'm talking to somebody about how my week went, and it ends up being I feel like I've been in this cave just focusing on CMMC and projects and all this stuff. And then, it's interesting to come out of that. You feel like you're in this fog and this cave of, one thing that you're focusing on, to realize, man, there's so many other things that we are totally not spending as much time thinking about and prioritizing as we all, like critical infrastructure. It's definitely interesting to just hear the frustrations, it seems like, that are even going on that side of the world. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
I do think of the DoD as pioneering in this space.
I agree.
I commend them for that. I'm hopeful that other critical infrastructure is watching and even is subject to it, like some of the suppliers to the bases, some of the power companies. They're watching, they're now having to go down that path, and I hope that means let's revisit this. Maybe this is a better way to do it.
When you say, suppliers to the bases as an example, how much is CMMC actually going to help with some of the more critical infrastructure level concerns? Because, CMMC, even at level 2, that's for data residing on information systems. And so are you saying that as part of those projects, have you seen the, DIPCAC or anybody else kind of putting their kind of foot down and kind of really emphasizing specialized assets and assessments and stuff like that, these SCADA systems or things like that might be involved in that critical infrastructure?
It's not just those kinds of assets. I know that they're applying this to companies that are providers to bases, including power, because they have sensitive data. They have
Right,
data
right.
that they need to protect. They've got the exact layout. They know where the critical buildings are inside the base. We were at Wright Pat. I was speaking there about 3 weeks ago, and one of the lawn care companies, they're making go through level 2. And I stopped and thought about it. I thought, good, because you know what? They know a lot. You may think that this little mowing company of 20 people, what the heck can they do? Well, they know a lot about that base. They know the back doors. They know where the general is. So yeah, good. Go through level 2.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember hearing a story a long time ago, like way, way, way back, like, before JSVA, like we're talking like 2021 of like joking about like lawn mowing companies coming in and having these clauses show up on their contracts and then being like, what the heck is this? Hey, but the logic is the same. It's not about the type of company that's receiving the data that determines or predicates the importance of the data. It's the data itself needs to be protected.
Data.
Yeah.
Yep. You put that data on your information system. Sorry.
Ain't 171, baby. Yeah. So one thing I was going to ask you is, you talked about the founding of Meerkat and its perspective on, interpersonal debate and growing and things like that. But what are the main niches or functions or services that Meerkat provides that becomes so useful for? Like what is Meerkat's bread and butter?
It's CMMC guidance for sure. We came across the C3PO line late in 2025, so we are starting to do assessments.
Okay.
But by far, what was our bread and butter this entire time has been CMMC guidance. You could say RPO work, although we're not an RPO. I don't look at us as necessarily the same as an RPO. We're a bunch of assessors that are seeing both sides, both the preparatory work and the assessments. We're sitting in on our clients' assessments, and I think that gives us a skill set that we can prepare DIB contractors for their assessments, and that's really what we do well. Again, I think that skill set can apply across other places, and that's where, while I don't have this backlog of water companies knocking on the door, hey, can you help us be compliant? I still think the messaging needs to be out there. Let's talk about it. If you guys want to improve your cybersecurity, we're good at that. That's what we do best. But so far, most of the speaking engagements in other sectors of critical infrastructure, they're just public service announcements. We're there to hopefully educate people and start talking about, and it's going to be a year's process to start talking about, should we review what water, frameworks look like and what they are not required to do right now, but would be ideal.
Yeah. No, I definitely see it being incredibly valuable, like the niche that you're not niche because there's a lot of companies dealing with CMMC now, but like more so the niche way that you're engaging with CMMC, because this is what we do. Or at least have done, kind of some of our background, we would, as we were developing Intelli, the app, we're also like helping doing preparatory work and sitting on assessments and using that experience as R&D for Intelli. I'm sure
exactly
had given you that experience, that spiel.
Frankly, that's what sets you apart. I love that you guys did that, do that, and you're listening.
Yeah, and I feel like, a lot of companies that have had, including MSPs, this is, one reason why we've kind of centralized our focus on MSPs and like providers, consultancies and stuff like that, is we're never going to be able to have the bandwidth to support the hundreds of thousands of contractors and vendors in the DIB supply chain like an MSP will. They are exponentially able to support, right? That's their whole business model. So but what that tells me is, as I've seen MSPs, especially here recently, go, and you guys have probably seen similar things, MSPs or companies go through these assessments, it does, when they pass, it does build a knowledge base for them that they did not have as they were prepping for the, it's one thing to read 800-171. It's one thing to read the 32 CFR. It's one thing to read the CAP and read all this. But once you've sat in in a live assessment and then taken that experience and applied that experience, that then the next project, it changes everything. I mean, it really does. We've seen it work. Do you see the same thing?
100%. I hesitate recommending a client a DIB contractor ever go to an MSP that hasn't at least gone through the process themselves or been through with a number of clients, because it is very niche. It's very much something that, as much as I'm sure a lot of MSPs would love to say we're experts at it, I have not seen that unless they've been there and done that.
Yeah, it's like, it's like the common colloquial saying, like if you really like a band or something like that, and you're jealous of people that go through it for the first time, but you see them come out the other side and there's this confidence, but you're able to see so stark of a difference between what it looked like as they were leading up to their first assessment and then the services they offer from thence on. It's night and day a lot of the time,
right?
From my perspective. Yeah. Does Meerkat in your consultancy, right, in your guys' guidance, I don't know if you guys just consider yourself a consultancy, or, do you have any MSSP type elements where ongoing, relationships with clients? What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. We have a skill set that we can set up a GCC High enclave, for example, have the client fully ready for their assessment. And could we technically, if we wanted to continue services on an MSSP or MSP, we don't want to do that. We don't want to be the support desk at 3 a.m. when somebody's locked out of Windows or whatever. That's not our dream. And frankly, we're not as good as MSSPs and MSPs at their job. So we will, if we need to, help stand them up. But we look for, and again, we have a lot of MSPs that we work with as well, just like you guys
partners.
do.
Yeah,
we'll look for a partner for them to be handed off to. Please use somebody else. Don't try to do this internally. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah,
and we'll give you 2 or 3 options to pick and see which one works for you.
So if an OSC, like, a contractor is looking for how they would utilize your services best, would that look like, almost like a vCISO type, like fractional role where, one of your team members gets assigned to them, builds a rapport and a relationship with them, reviews what they have, and then the only ongoing nature would be, that fractional CISO type relationship?
Exactly. And we do that with a number of our clients. We have not yet offered it outside of clients that we prepared, because you don't know what you're going to get there. But if you've prepared them for your assessment, you know exactly what you're dealing with. You've got a relationship, and we offer, let's keep it going. You've got ongoing compliance requirements, and they're not easy. I mean, we were just listening to a closeout today, and it's a very real thing that they need to be tracking that 1-year date. The DoD or the SPRS is not going to be reminding you, hey, by the way, you should come in and do your annual attestation. And there's a lot at stake if you don't. So yes, I think they need a vCISO, or they need to have somebody very skilled on staff, like a CCA or CCP, who's going to be tracking that stuff for them.
Yeah. And are you saying then that you also may maintain a relationship with these clients to kind of fill that void for them?
100%.
Yeah,
we're vCISO for a number of companies right now that we helped prepare and got them through their assessments. So far, knock on wood, and I hope we can continue this. Everyone we prepared got a perfect score at the assessment. We don't believe in POAMs, and we believe let's do it right the first time. So as long as we can keep that up, keep making clients happy, we have a really good likelihood of being their ongoing vCISOs for the ongoing compliance.
I'm curious what because we've dealt with clients. Dealt with this sounds harsh. We've helped and supported clients of all shapes and sizes. What has been, you don't have to say any names, of course, please don't, but what has been your most challenging client to get through their assessment with a perfect score, right, with that certification? And what is the type of infrastructure and context that they had that made it so challenging that you can maybe share and maybe other people can learn to mentally prepare for?
So the most challenging is one that's not there yet. If you want to hear the most challenging, we have been working with far longer than our average client. I'll tell you, one of them we just did in less than a month, and we don't do that for just anybody, but they had an emergency. We dropped everything. We got them compliant and assessed in less than 30 days.
Whoa.
That was one that wrapped up today. And so it was successful.
Congrats.
But most clients, you know, the DIB is averaging more like 9 months just to get prepared. We're at 2 years with one client, and one of the characteristics that I think is going to slow things down is how big is your organization, how widespread is the CUI and FCI, is it multinational? And when you hit all those things, and this is a thousands of employees company that's multinational and didn't even know where all their CUI is. When you've got all that playing against you, and then you have leadership that says, you mean just in my level 1, I have to upgrade our software? We got this old unsupported software that they're using. They didn't want to upgrade it. It's going to cost over $1 million. Yeah, well, that's not level 1 compliant. You guys have been saying you're level 1 compliant, so we have a problem. We need to talk about that. And then you get lawyers. They have lawyers, of course, and they have others who have already advised them that are now looking at eating their words and trying to defend that, yeah, we submitted a self-attestation that says we're level 1 compliant, and we're telling them, no, you're not. And so those pain points, when they happen at some of these bigger organizations, are what really, I think, thwart the process, where they're looking at their own people. They're very high-paid lawyers and saying, how did we get here? And they're looking at $1 million checks that have to go out the door to get compliant. Things slow down. It gets difficult to sell this harebrained idea of these Yahoo CMMC assessors that came in.
Yahoos. I've had almost the exact same experience. It's the huge companies that have so much going on that, and it's, in my opinion, it's one thing to have, just a really big infrastructure. Yes, that does increase literally by definition, the amount of work that you have to do. What I have seen, and I'm sure you're hinting at this too, is what I have seen as the main thing that slows down a project is when there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know if you've, share that disposition, but
yeah, that's exactly what you have when you have attorneys and you have
too many cooks, baby.
Right, too many cooks.
Well, and we're not just talking about, and this is the other thing, is it's not just talking about necessarily too many cooks from like a leadership perspective, like too many leaders that have different purviews. It's also like, we've seen a company that has an entire engineering team that's got to get in sync, and then an entire development team, and then an entire database administration. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's like entire different worlds that people are interacting with, and then they have their own sets of pushback and questions and frustrations. And it's just, when there's so many people that you're trying to get all on the same page, what do you think is the solution to that? Because we got to give hope to the big guys too, right? Like, we've got to give them some hope, right?
So I think it all comes from the top. If you can get executive support up at the top, and I think that can be challenging, but if they're saying, yeah, compliance and cybersecurity is such a huge issue, we're going to throw more money than we ever have before at it to do this. That's what we need the executives saying. And when you get that, and you get the people underneath there and those various teams you're talking about who have support to work together, and the executive said, we got you here, then I think we're going to see change. We're going to see cooperation, and let's get over the finish line. But I think that's the conversation that CISOs are becoming more important than ever, because they're realizing this is a big deal. And, one breach, one ransomware, companies can go under. So this is not something where you say, I don't want to spend more than $100,000 in this department to do X, Y, Z. That conversation is being had right now. And I feel good that executives are learning the value of this, but it's a slow process.
Well, as I'm thinking over all that we've kind of chatted through, I'm just curious, what are some of the main things that, anybody that's listening, if you could be king of their life for a day, what would you be telling them they need to do, whether it's for NERC, whether it's for CMMC, or just practical cybersecurity means? I mean, what is it that you feel like nobody's thinking about and nobody's prioritizing?
Well, until you said nobody, I was going to have an answer for you, but let me tell you what the first answer is that comes to mind for me is we need to think of this as not such an ugly animal that is going to cost a lot of money to be compliant. This needs to be, hey, it's a good thing. It's really good to be cyber secure, because IP theft that could kill off a company, ransomware that could kill off a company, and these things are happening. Look at the F-22 and F-35. They're sitting on Chinese tarmacs because we didn't keep our data safe. What can a company benefit from by going down this process? I wish that was the question that was being asked in general, rather than how much is it going to cost me? How much does it save me? How much does it help the future of this company? Or if all else you need, and Katie Arrington would be stomping up and down, are there lives at stake if I don't do this? Well, if you're in the DIB, there are probably lives at stake. If you think of it that way, how important this is to our future, to lives, to the future of the company, the grumblings about how much it costs become less noisy. I think that's what I would like to see, the change of tone in.
Yeah, I think it was, I talked to Carter Schoenberg on here, Carter from formerly Soundway. Now it's, I think, Cognac. I think they rebranded. It was really cool, actually. But he was on here. When he was on here, he was telling me about, the way they do a risk assessments when he was really integral in some of the industries that he was working on. And it was very similar. It was like, how do we assign dollar amounts to these risks to where the conversation is not, what's this going to cost me to fix it? Is what am I going to lose if I don't fix it? What is the blessing that comes from doing this right?
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if we can get more people harping on the lives that are being saved and preserved and protected from harm because of, our war fighters and, a lot of, and this is not just war fighters. I mean, we're talking about people here at home that are involved in and being protected by implement. I mean, it's good for our systems. Like, it's just good for our business too. It secures. It would be one thing if it only protected CUI data. Why somebody would, have some questions about how beneficial is it, but it's good for us, MFA is good for you. So yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah. No, I think that's good. And I really appreciate you coming on here. I'm curious, what hobbies, anything coming up that you'd like to share and talk about? I know you're busy. I know it's crazy. You
know what my hobby is that dates back to college is rowing. But you know what the waiting list is to get on that damn Potomac? 2 years.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like rowing, like in, what do you mean by that?
Single scull, in college you have the eights. That's what I did in college at Purdue. I've been rowing ever since. Won Midwest when I was there, and didn't go to nationals because grumble, my law firm said, we got too much work for you to be pissing around with these, rowing competitions. But it's a great sport. It's one that you need water, and the Potomac has a
lot of it.
An established rowing program that's really top notch, except for that pesky little waiting list. So that's a hobby that I think about daily, and I'll get back out on the water, but it's just
one
a little bit. Yeah, one day.
Maybe when everybody's level 2 certified, you'll get on it.
I don't want to wait for that.
No, that's cool. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm curious, can you share how people can get up with you and can get up with, Meerkat, and, if they want to follow up and get more information from you guys.
100% reach out. Chris at meerkatcyber.com. We'll gladly geek out all day over CMMC. We'll put all those other people to sleep that don't want to hear about it. But yeah, that's our gig. We like talking about it.
Yep. Awesome. Well, and you're on LinkedIn too, I see. I sent you a friend. I don't know how we weren't friends already, but it's there. It's in your.
Let's fix
waiting
that
for you. Yeah, it's waiting for you. But Chris, again, thanks so much, and I guess everybody will see you in the next one.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.